Welcome to Sons of God 24/7 Ministries, and I'm Roxy, and I've got a video that I did on David and Goliath, part of it. But I've actually seen this now. I've got a testimony I want to share today, and so I've got to cover a lot of ground. But the Lord actually showed me a David and Goliath and how we can put that in our life. If we're not careful, we take the Old Covenant and we make them like good stories we tell our kids, but they're not. 1 Corinthians 10, I believe it is, says that these things, the things in the Old Covenant, were written as an example to us upon whom the ends of the ages has come. So actually in the Old Covenant, God's actually teaching us the fatherhood of God. And in the New Covenant, Jesus is displaying who the Father was. And Philip said to him, Jesus, show us the Father. And he was kind of grieved. I think he said that with a grieving spirit. He said, Philip, how is it that you've been so long with me and you say, show us the Father? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And that really helped me. That'd be a whole other conversation. But that really helped me because I thought, really, I still had God back here, the old man with a stick. And everything. Well, he's a father, and sometimes if you're misbehaving, you need a stick. But that's not my message today. Okay, so I'm going to go back through. I'm going to have a testimony, but I want to lead you up to that testimony and show you how it worked practically in our life just last weekend. And I'm so thankful for it. So I'm going to skip some things today, but you can go back and read all this in 1 Samuel 17. That's the story of David and Goliath. Okay, so 1 Samuel 17, verse 23. I'll start there. And it says, then as he talked with them, there was the champion. Now, he is David. He had been tending the sheep, and his dad sent him out with some cheese and bread and everything for his brothers and to find out how things was going in the field. So here's the picture. You got Israel, and the armies of Israel is on one mountainside, and the armies of the Philistines was on the other, and a valley in between. And they had a giant, a huge man. And for 40 days, he had went back and forth and tormented and defied and mocked the armies of Israel. And they were sorely afraid, very afraid. And they knew that eventually, if something didn't happen, they were coming down the valley and up the hill to take them. So they was not in a good slot. And there's times in our life. Now, try to relate some of this to your life, that fights that you have, and that the enemy is big, it's a mountain, and you don't know how you're going to get through it, over it, around it, or whatever. And so you can put the spiritual application to your life, because everybody's is different the way the enemy comes. But nevertheless, it's the enemy. And he's powerful. He is a giant. I hate it when people say that he's been defanged. Well, there's a partial truth in that. But I'm going to tell you, he's a formidable opponent. And you better know how to fight. That's what I'm learning. And I'll tell you what, fighting's fun when you win. I'll tell you about that after a while. Okay, so then as he talked with them, he's talking with his brothers, and even his brothers is mocking him and telling him to go home and take care of those few sheep you have and everything. It says, there was the champion. Now take this like it is. The Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines. And he spoke according to the same words. So David heard them. So David heard the giant mocking and defying the armies of God. And I think it created a righteous anger in him. And all the men of Israel, when they saw this man, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. I mean really afraid. Today was going to be life or death for some of them. So the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. This one battle is going to set David basically in a very place of blessing. And he will us too. but we've got battles to get there as well. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man? And then he told him, for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine? It means a man that's not of the covenant. David was a man of the covenant. In the old covenant, circumcision was a sign of the covenant. That's another teaching. That he should defy the armies of the living God. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine who has the guts and the nerve to come out there, and for 40 days he's been tormenting the men of Israel and the army of Israel? And who does he think he is? He's not of the covenant, and David is, and he knows it, and that's where his confidence is coming from. And the people answered him in this manner, saying, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was aroused against David. And he said, why did you come out down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And David said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? What he's saying is, man, you've been tormented for 40 days by this guy and you've done nothing. Is there not a cause that I would get involved in this? Well, sure there is. Then he turned from him toward another and said the same thing. And these people answered him as the first ones did. Now when the words, catch that word words, because I'm going to do another teaching on that, and we got to have it, which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Don't be afraid, Saul. I'll go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth, and when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. This is worth mentioning right here. One of the things that generally God don't send you out to battle the giant before he's already, like with David. David had already killed the lion and the bear, so he grabbed him by his beard and took him down. And so for ours, it'd be like, for instance, our children had been sick, and I'm telling you, I prayed a prayer and God delivered. And you got testimonies all through the times that God delivered you from the enemies, which sometimes could be the flu, it could be all kinds of things. But because you believed the Lord and fought the battle and had victory, then it built your confidence in the Lord. Moreover, let's see. So Saul clothed David with his armor, and he put a bronze helmet on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword to his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. He had done what he had done with his bare hands and with a slingshot and a stone. And he had not tested that kind of armor. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good-looking. I don't know what, at that point in time, what good looking would have would have helped. So the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your..." Now I want to say something right here. We're starting right here. How I want you to see this is what the Lord just gave revelation, and I've not heard this taught in the body of Christ. But I believe this is what happened. And everything. They've always taught that David took 5 stones because Goliath had 4 brothers, that if David did whip Goliath, which they didn't think he would, but if he did, 4 brothers would have been coming after David, so he saved those 4 other ones to be able to do those brothers. That might be, but the Lord's given me revelation on that. How many times have you been sick and you prayed, and before you got well something else come, and before you got that one something else come? I taught part of this in Christian Life Fellowship last Wednesday night, and every one of us has had that. And then you didn't get through with one. The enemy don't want you to win, so the battle is on, and the battle's actually on after you pray and confess the Word of God. How many times have you prayed, know the presence of the Lord was there, believed in the person who was laying hands on you, all of the above, and the next day you were sicker than you was before the prayer? Well, that's because the devil comes out swinging, and you better have how. I said, David, he was used to laying on that hillside, read Psalms, and you can tell what David was doing. He was tending the sheep and praising and worshiping and learning of God and everything. Well, most of us have life, and we've not put the time in that David has. Some of us haven't even killed the lion and the bear yet, and here comes a big one. I've had people in my family, and I'll tell you what, they didn't make it. It wasn't. We've got to be ready, and particularly now, it'd be another teaching, but this is the year of Jubilee, and I'm going to tell you, we're either going to come out good this year, or it's going to be a year we go down. It works both ways. So the Lord's called me out for such a time as this. I believe He has. And so I'm asking you to study this and give it to your family and your friends, and let's get them aware of this and be ready for the battle that's ahead of us. And God's already given me a plan for that battle, and so we'll be doing that one too. But we've got to get some stuff in you, or what'll happen is we'll go to battle, we won't be able to win, and when we don't win, we'll spend the next 6 years wondering why God didn't deliver us and blaming Him for what happened. Now that's what happens, and then that develops unbelief in us. Now, God has sent me up ahead of time to tell you, and He did this for me. He's doing some of this stuff for me personally, and out of the tests are coming the testimonies. And so my faith is being built. It should be, just the Word ought to be enough, but it's not. We've got to see it. And so I've been going through some things, but I'll tell you what, God's been showing up, and He'll do it for you. He's not a respecter of persons, and that's why I'm here today. I want to see us win. I want to see us pull together. I want us to help each other and be victorious over the power of the enemy. God didn't have this stuff planned for us. Okay, so now what I want you to see in verse 44, here starts a war of words, and I'm going to do one on that. What you say, well, Mark 11 says, whosoever shall say to this mountain, be thou removed, and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things which he saith shall come to pass. Really? Now that's the word. Now you got to figure out, are you a believer or not? Do you believe that? And I'll tell you, there's times if you ask me that question, I would say, well, sure. I'm a Christian and I do believe it. Well, then why have I went through sickness? Why have I had financial problems at times? Why have I not been able to be victorious in every way? So God's getting us ready. He's testing us, and He's getting us ready to send us out. Because it's not His will that any should perish, and He wants His people blessed, delivered, healed, prospered, protected, provided for, forgiven, all of the above. And He's already paid the price for that. But we have got to get to where we believe it, we stand on it, and receive it. So you got to know the Word and what you're standing on. And the Philistines said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Now, if David had backed up and said, man, this is a big one. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this or not. I may be out there on the limb, Lord. I'm asking you to come and help me. He didn't have that in him. He done killed the lion and the bear. And he was going to take this uncircumcised Philistine because he was coming against the people of God. We're going to have to do the same thing. Our families, for one, our children. I hear from parents every day, how bad things are with their children, and have went through it for years and years and years and years, and robs them of their joy. Well, God never meant that. So it tells me that my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will reject you and your children. Why is that? Because you don't know how to fight. You don't know the Word. You know some things. But evidently I did. After, it'd been about 30-some years, evidently I didn't have enough in me. No, the devil got me busy doing something that wasn't even him. Wasn't even the Lord. And while that was going on then, my faith was actually being torn down, not being built up. Okay, so verse 45. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And basically, translated, he was saying, well, Goliath, you have got all that. And I am just a ruddy little good-looking 17-year-old boy. But I'll tell you what, you've defied the armies of God. And I come to you, not with my weaponry. I come to you in the name of the Lord. And the Lord will get it done. So he didn't receive the evil report. He come back with what God wanted him to come back with. Victory. He called the victory in with his words. I'll prove that to you out of the Word in one of my teachings. Can't wait to get there. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. Now David's telling the giant what he's going to do to him. The giant's told David what the giant intended to do to David. He's saying, that ain't going to happen, son, because the Lord's doing my battling for me. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. It glorifies the Lord when we win the victory. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. So it was when the Philistines arose and came and drew near to meet David. Then David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead. Now you got to see the real picture here. I mean, I've seen it in my mind. He had all this armor. Well, he started with the helmet, and that helmet actually had a big part of his face covered and head covered. So the first miracle was that a stone could even get through to him and everything. Well, then he had the breastplate, all on that, and then from his knees on down with bronze, and then this big spear with bronze. Okay, so then here is the armor bearer. So he's standing, no doubt he was a giant too, or the biggest man that the Philistines had, and so he's out in front. Well, I played ball. It wouldn't have been hard to have put that shield wherever it needed to be, to stop that stone. So it virtually was an impossibility, first of all, for that stone to get past all of that and hit him in the right place to knock him down. And then David went and took the giant's sword and cut his head off. Now, here's why I said I don't believe that he took 5 stones to kill them other 4 brothers. Because when that happened, the Philistines ran for their life. So he didn't need 4 more stones for that. What I believe happened is he was not testing the Lord and being irresponsible. I think he took all 5 stones, and there was a song or something that said, if the left one don't get you, then the right one will. I believe he took 5 stones because if that first one hadn't got him, then he had 4 more, and he knew that one of them would get the job done. So he was counting on the Lord, but he prepared himself, and God always tells us that, to prepare, but the battle is not yours, it's the Lord's. 2 Chronicles 20. That one's in. Said you have to prepare. He told him to prepare. But you won't have to fight even. The battle is the Lord's. And kind of that's what was happening here. Okay, so then David put his hand in his bag and took out the stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead. Quite a power. And he fell on his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. Okay, now, I have tagged this as saying this was actually a war of words. I told you Mark 11:23. Whosoever will say to this mountain, be thou removed and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith. So David didn't draw back at telling him what he was going to do to him. And there's power because he's a man of the covenant. Now, what's that have to do with you? Listen, this happened. He took down that giant actually by the words of his mouth. And God, confessing, by his confession, I'd say, it said that he slung it so hard that it went into his forehead. I'd say he had there's lots you could do with that. But I want to give a testimony, so I got to skip some stuff. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of his sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. So see, that tells you right there that but he was ready for the battle if he needed more stones. Now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the road, even as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the children of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their tents and took their spoil, naturally. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. Now, reading this again today, I saw something else. I'm pretty sure that was the last time David fought with a sling and a stone. He took Goliath's armor, and no doubt if he put it in his tent, he had every intention of actually using that. He didn't use it the first time because he had not tested it, didn't know how to use it. It was out of his category. Okay, there's tons of stuff to know about that. And of course, David was blessed from Saul with the things that he told him. In fact, it was just the beginning of that, because before it was over with, David became a mighty warrior and made Saul even jealous. There's a whole great big story, not story, but fact with that, and everything. So that story goes on. Okay, so I had a giant in my life. Me and my grandson did, and I'm going to share that. Because God wants, and I've been praying that the Lord would reveal Himself, because I tell you, some of that is hard to believe, guys. I ponder over it, and I know that it's true because you read it in the Word. Like Isaiah 53, by the stripes of Jesus, I was healed. I told Tommy this morning, I said, Tommy, we're not reaching out for the healing. It was already done 2,000 years ago. We got to work on us believing that and receiving that. And when the enemy comes, throw another stone. And when the enemy comes, throw another stone. I've had to do that. I have had to do that. The enemy means to defeat me. And actually, pray for him, because he is a formidable opponent. I'm not taking down who he is at all, because he is a formidable opponent. But I'm going to tell you, there is no name, no Goliath in our life, no mountain in our life that is bigger than the name and the blood and the Word of God. We got to know what He wants. We got to speak that. We got to believe it, receive it, and it's ours. If the Word says it, I believe the Word. And way back when I was having a lot of trouble, couldn't even raise myself up, I told my sons, if Mom don't make it, and I didn't know what I know now. I didn't have enough knowledge the enemy hit me so hard and so fast, and I didn't have enough knowledge to defeat him. My faith was not at a point that I could defeat the giants in my life. And so little by little by little, he has allowed the testing to come that he can show me. And I gave you a testimony on, does God still do miracles? The answer to that is yes. Okay, so weekend before last, one of my grandsons is a wrestler, and he's done pretty good in the flesh. You don't win them all and everything. So what they were having was the regionals. Now, the regionals in our area brings our area down to the better wrestlers. And so he evidently was good enough that he got into the regionals and everything. Well, it started on Saturday morning, and it was about 11 o'clock before I got there, and Ryan had already wrestled one. So Dylan was sitting there, and when I come in, and I said, has Ryan wrestled yet? And he said, yeah. And I said, how'd he do? He said, Grandma, he was smoked. And he had wrestled that same boy, I think it was on the Friday before that, and that boy threw him around everywhere, and I left there mad that my grandson was even wrestling in it against that boy. That boy was good and definitely was not matched up, that he had been trained. You could tell. I watched it. I haven't went, I think maybe 2 or 3 before that, just because they were home games and he wants Grandma there, and I get so whatever about it, nervous about it, and they can get hurt, and he's been hurt. He's had concussions, everything under the sun, and so I'm aggravated that he's even, don't seem like he's matched up. That boy had moves. He had been trained, you could tell. They had groomed him for that, and you could tell Ryan wasn't. Now, he was doing pretty good as far as that goes for the level of training that he was on and everything, so he got smoked. Well, he had to, if he won the next one, then he had to do 2 more, which would be 3 that day. Well, it would have been 4 altogether that he was wrestling with that day. So I got just a holy anger, I think, and so I began to talk to Ryan about this battle right here, that David was only 17 years old. He done it with a sling, but not because that could do it. It couldn't do it. He said the right things. His confidence was not in him. In him, there was no way. In Ryan, there was no way he could beat that boy. He'd done been beat 2 times, pretty bad, and everything. So he couldn't do it. And I told him that. I said, Ryan, you can't do it. He knew that. I said, but I'll tell you what, Grandma's going to be praying. You pray with me. And you count on him. Don't count on yourself. Because you count on yourself, you're going to lose. We know that already, right? Right. And I could tell by him, he was receiving what Grandma was teaching him right there. And remember now, I had prayed that the Lord would reveal himself to him on a level that he could accept it. Because I think 3 years in a row when he's went to camp down there at Rudiment, that the Lord has called him into his ministry. Oh, I've only got 2 minutes left. There's no way I can do it. And everything. So I tell you what, I don't want to bust up this testimony. I want to give his testimony on one by itself. So we're going to quit right now. Generally, Tommy shuts me off or the thing shuts me off, the camera shuts me off, and I'm still talking, and my sister loves to laugh about that. So we have a good time at what we're doing, I'll say that. But Lord willing, I'll do another, and we'll give that testimony because I want you to hear the whole testimony. So stay